This is one of my favorite presentations to educate people on how the market actually functions and get different products that do different things inside that market and show how much different the market would have been over that period had you had this type of product. But let's go over what the market history tool actually has. It has its own internal draw. So if I want to do any drawings, I can. Okay, it's got a lot of indexes. So we've got the Dow Jones Industrial, the S&P 500 price, the S&P total return, which has the dividends included. We have some Canadian indexes here, the TSX. We have the Russell 2000. We have the NASDAQ, World Equity for international. We have 10-year government, 20-year muni, and 30-year corporate bonds. So you can actually mimic bond behavior and use this information to kind of help educate somebody how those things work. So I'm going to just stick with the S&P price. And I have kind of a favorite that I like. I like 2000 to 2025 or 2022, and mainly because of, that's, since I've been kind of investing and doing my own finances, that's about the time frame I was in. I was born in 70, dating myself, but this is a very, very volatile period of time that we can use. Okay. Now, the area that I want to focus on first is down here. All right. Again, I was on the S&P price, 2000 to 2022 is what I'm going to do, just for giggles. Okay. So you can see I selected 23 years here, the average rate of return. So I'm going to focus over here. I'm going to see if I can get the draw tool to work now. There we go. So you'll see I have a box here that says actual, okay, and a box that says limited. And right now, they're both identical. It's because I haven't made any optional limit adjustments. We're going to do that. But what I want to focus on is what am I actually showing here? I'm showing someone that I've selected a 23-year market, right? The average rate of return is 5.9, and the actual rate of return is 4.26. Now, don't miss this. This is very important. And I use this a lot. I say this number here, this is math. This number here, this is money. Money and math aren't the same, right? So the average, they simply take the rates of return over the period and add them all up, right? And then divide them by the number of years, right? But that's not how money works. The actual is how your dollar performs. So if I invested $1 at the beginning of 2000 and I wrote it all the way out to oops, let me back that up. If I wrote it all the way out to 2022, I'd have, you know, 4.26 return. I'd have $2.61. Now you see, I have a loss right there at 2022 as well. Thank you, COVID. Right, I have a big loss right up at 2008. Right, thank you, housing, and of course the three losses right here in 2000 to 2000, the dot-com bust. Right, so if I invested $1 at this point, you can see my value goes down year by year at the beginning. Then it finally climbs back out, but I'm not even again in 2007. That's why average is different than actual. And almost always, there are a few exceptions, but almost always the actual will be lower than the average. So when someone says they're averaging a certain performance, that's math. That's not money. How are you actually doing? Okay. So let me get rid of the draw tool here. So now I can also take this exact same market and show you if, Mr. Client, I could actually keep you from losing any money. If I could institute a floor, right? What happens now? Now you're going to notice that the actual and limited changed drastically, right? So I said, okay, so instead of taking a negative 10% in that first year, I just didn't get anything. So at the end of the year in my investment, I had 90 cents. In the end of the year in my protected environment, I still had $1. In fact, you'll notice I'm 40% better at the end of 2002 if I could have just avoided the losses. Okay. Now, of course, you're always going to have to institute a cap when you have a floor. So let's just say we set the cap at 12. Okay. So now I've set a cap. Now, what does that mean? Well, I can show someone, well, in 2003, the market, this index performed at 26.38%. But because I had a cap, I only got a 12% return. Now, over the period of time with this market history, is that a bad thing? No, it's not. Look at my actual rate of return over the period. I got an actual rate of return of 6.6, average 6.8. It's a whole point better almost than the average with just full market risk. And it's almost 2 points better in my actual rate of return. And if I'd put $1 into that same vehicle, instead of having $2.61, I'd have $4.40. So I can show somebody pretty quickly what it means to have those floor and cap, what an actual indexed product does, right? Now, the other buttons that I have available, okay, I can do a buffer. So if I do a buffer of 5%, right, what that means is if there's a loss, I don't incur the first 5% of it. So see my limited return, right? So instead of taking the full 10% loss, I took a 5.14% loss. Why? Because I had a 5% buffer. Okay. We already went over cap because I tie cap and floor together pretty tightly. Participation, I can tell you, I can decide how much of the money is actually participating in the investment. Spread is the opposite of buffer. If I put a 5% spread, then on my winning years, right, it doesn't affect my losing years, but on my winning years, I give the investor the first five, and then I take what's left over. Okay. I can also show the impact of fees. If you've got a 2% fee, what does that look like? That really hurts, right? 4.26 to 4.23 actual. Now, the funny thing is in the average, it's just a straight 2%. Look at that. It added a 0.23 because I'm losing money every year that doesn't get to compound. So it's important to take a look at that. All right. Okay. And then the last optional setting that I have is the multi-year. So now this one I can set so I can, it's going to do a 2-year look back or a 3-year look back. This is okay if you want to kind of illustrate the idea of a annuity or something that has a multi-year look back. I typically don't use that very much, but it's there. Okay. Now, the other thing that I like, let me do this one last thing. I can also take a simple kind of equation here and say, well, what if the client has $100,000 to give me? Right. Well, what would it look like if I invested it for them here? Right. Okay. So if I just put it, in an indexed return and gotten similar returns to the S&P 500, at the end of 23 years, they'd have 261,294. Well, if I could have set that floor at 0 and that cap at 12, what would they have? Okay, so we can show them, that the behavior of the accounts is good. We can teach them some lessons here, and we can change this number to whatever we want to make it kind of more fit what they're doing. Actually, let me leave that there and leave the floor and the cap. So from here, if I wanted to, I can also produce a little report for them. I can say, so, here's the annualized return, right? And this is what it did year by year over that period. And then the limited return. See, my 100,000 stayed 100,000 for those first 3 years and then started to grow. Okay. And then I can, of course, I can download this. I can export it to Excel. I can print it to PDF if I want to. And, so I've got a lot of things I can do here. But the great thing I love about this little pop-up is I can grab any market that I want, pick any set of years that I want. So if I want to go 1977 to 2000, we can do that and see what the market did. I want to change this back to $1. I can do that too. Oops. Sorry, let me get that. There we go. All right. So that's what I wanted to show you guys. It's a great little tool to help someone understand what's actually happening with an investment.